This time, we'll move to item 5A, consideration of an action on the City of Sugar Land Resolution Number 1537, a resolution of the City Council of City of Sugar Land, Texas, directing the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider an amendment to the Sugar Land Development Code to repeal Chapter 2, Article 2, Part 5, titled Planned Development Districts as adopted by Ordinance 2001-4, to readopt Chapter 2, Article 2, Part 16, titled Planned Development Districts as existed immediately prior to the adoption of Ordinance 2014, and to add new regulation limiting the number of multifamily units that could be built in a planned development district to a maximum of 200 units. At this time, let me explain several things. We have a council protocol that any two members of council can add an agenda item, and these two items were added by Councilmember Harish J. Jew and Councilmember Joe Zimmerman. We also have a subcommittee of council that has worked for the future land use plan, which also consisted of Councilmember Zimmerman, Councilmember J. Jew, and Ms. Young, and they've been working with the groups, the various public meetings for a little over 2 years, I believe. So obviously, we've had a lot of discussion in the community recently about this particular subject. I spoke with the city manager and have sent it back to the subcommittee to come back to the council for full recommendation, and that's where we are tonight. So we'll have additional discussion in a few minutes, but I also believe we have a presentation. Gentlemen, is approved. Go ahead and hear the presentation, then make your comments.
Yes.
Lisa, I believe you have a few things to show, and then we'll get back to the council discussion. So, Lisa Kosich-Meyer, or planner.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity. One of the things that I'd like to start off by just stepping you through, and our viewing public as well, is the differences between our comprehensive plan and our development code. Our comprehensive plan serves as a statement of our broad policy and really establishes and documents the vision, the long-term vision for our community. This is a required document if a city has zoning. Of course, we do have zoning, so we're required to have a comprehensive plan. Now, our development code is a regulatory document. It establishes the regulations necessary to implement those broad policies that are set out in our comprehensive plan. Now, what does the comprehensive plan say relative to certain types of developments, and specifically related to planned developments, the topic of the resolution proposed before you this evening? There are several things related to townhomes, condos, and apartments specifically. There are caps and districts requirement recommendations that are in the comprehensive plan related to these types of high-density residential. These components, these recommendations, these policy recommendations are intended to be regulated through our standard zoning districts. For example, the R4 multifamily zoning category. Now, related specifically to the Planned Development District, which we refer to as the PD zoning district, which is a customized zoning district to permit development of property in a unique way that would not necessarily conform to the standard zoning district requirements. And really what this results in is a customized set of regulations through the PD process. Now, the current comprehensive plan really provides no guidance on the specific development components and development specifics of what should be considered through the PD process. It does relate and or does specify that the PD process should be used for both planned residential type uses as well as mixed use type developments, and that these areas on our future land use plan map are only those areas that are already previously have been approved. It also specifies that the more detailed separation regulations, or requirements and policy recommendations under the townhome, condo, and apartment component of the comprehensive plan should not and do not apply to these procedures under the Planned Development District. It also specifies that location, density, and quality should be addressed and established through the detailed process of the Planned Development Ordinance process on a case-by-case basis. Now, historically, the city has used the plan development zoning district process for several reasons, and to date, we have approximately 30 PDs, final development plans, that have been approved in the city. This dates back to the 80s, when the plan development district zoning classification was added to our set of development regulations. The first PD that was approved in the city was actually the Fluor Corporation property along Fluor Daniel Drive, there along Brooks Lake. We've used the PD process throughout our development processes, our development history. Some of the more notable PD processes, and just to give you kind of a flavor of the range of types of development that have been developed through the PD process, include the First Crossing area, which includes the Sam's and Walmart and some of the surrounding office and commercial areas, developed through the plan development process. Where we sit today in this meeting, Town Square, which was an example of a mixed-use type development developed through the PD process. Lake Point, the residential component of Lake Point and some of the commercial areas were developed through the PD process. Likewise, Telfair, the commercial areas of Telfair were developed through the PD process and are continuing to develop through the PD process as required per council direction. There are also a few components of the single-family residential areas of Telfair that were developed through the PD process, which offered some unique products. And then currently the Imperial development. All of this development is going to be developed through the PD process per council direction, and most notably the most current, I guess, PD that will be before council soon is the Imperial Marketplace Planned Development District, which is the redevelopment of the former Imperial Sugar Refinery site. So the city has used the PD process as a method to really secure higher quality development with specific assurances in terms of the site layout that must accompany the PD process. Also, this results in a product of higher property value per acre in these types of developments. So why did we go through a process of amending the PD aspects of the development code? The prior code really only specified that development should be of superior development or offer special benefits to the community. There wasn't any established standards or criteria in the development code that would guide Planning and Zoning Commission staff, the City Council, in determining what is superior development or what offers those special benefits. So this kind of led to a lack of certainty on the part of both what the public could expect or what the developers could expect through the process, leading to a poorly defined process and really inconsistent benchmarks in terms of what staff, Planning and Zoning Commission, and City Council would use to evaluate PD applications as they came through the process. In terms of the specific updates that were incorporated into Ordinance 2014 related to the Planned Development District, included establishing that very specific criteria for truly different types of developments that we see here in Sugar Land. Those developments that are more focused on individual surface parking lots, which we would attribute more to a suburban type of development pattern, versus those developments that really rely on shared structured parking garages, which tends to be more on the urban style of development. Really, the distinction there is how the integration of uses are laid out and how those help to really achieve the more walkable type of development versus more of your suburban style development, which tends to be more spread out, relying on larger individual parking lots to serve those types of developments. Through the update, we also clarified submittal and approval procedures. We have modified the final development plan submittal timeframes based on current practices, and we established some very specific informational and submittal requirements for the PD application submittals themselves. The resolution before council this evening, as the mayor stated, resulted after a meeting of members of the Land Use Plan Task Force. There are three aspects that are components of this proposed resolution. As was stated, the resolution directs the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider an amendment to the Development Code to do three things: repeal the changes to the Development Code regarding planned development districts that were approved as part of Ordinance 2014, and readopt the previous Planned Development Code language. Also introduce a cap of 200 units on the multifamily within planned developments. And this type of cap has never existed related to planned developments and has traditionally only applied to the multifamily development under your standard R4 zoning category. With that, in anticipation of what this process would look like, anticipation of direction this evening on the resolution. This process would go back to Planning and Zoning Commission, we estimate in the December timeframe. Because this is related to zoning regulations within the Development Code, it will require a public hearing and recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then following, moving on to City Council, which would anticipate happening sometime in the December, January timeframe. Again, because it is related to zoning regulations, this will require a public hearing before City Council, as well as reading of an ordinance, an approval of an ordinance on first and second reading. So with that, that is a high-level overview, and I'm available for any questions that council may have.
Very good. Thank you, Lisa. Why don't I ask comments of the committee? Whoever. Councilmember Zimmerman, Councilmember Harris. Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you, Mayor. All of us on City Council believe that the citizens are best served by the leaders they elect when they are engaged and informed. All of us on City Council realize that we serve at the pleasure of you, the public, and that we're your elected representatives to thoroughly examine and take action on those issues that are important to you, our citizens. The action you see us placing on the agenda tonight is a recognition of what we've heard both in emails, a District 3 and 4 town hall meeting, as well as phone calls and discussions out in the public. Process of putting this item on the agenda, it'll follow our typical process, which will now go, as you heard Lisa say, it'll go for a public hearing on the Planning and Zoning Commission, a consideration and action on the Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll then take that up as council at a public hearing with a consideration and action to follow, and Lisa kind of outlined what that was. It's intended to allow for you all, as the public, to participate in the public hearings, which are a very important part of the process. My hope is that each of you will participate in the public hearings process and take advantage of the basic right which is guaranteed to all of us in Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution.
Mr. J.J.
Thank you, Mayor. And I got a few comments, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution, Mayor. But I want to thank all our residents for their concern, their feedback, and quite frankly, their civic engagement in this process, including organizing a petition, coming to the town hall meeting, including taking me to the task. They're very clear on the issue of multifamily development and changes to our recently approved development code. To them, I say, we are listening, and as your representative on the council, it is my job to listen. The resolution on the table rescinds a portion of the code pertaining to PD and is replaced by the previous code. In addition, it limits multifamily to no more than 200 units in any PD zoning. In my view, the cap on the multifamily provides predictability to our residents, staff, as well as our developers, and it preserves the quality of life in Sugar Land. My hope is that as we continue to move forward in updating our land use plan, I will ask our city manager and staff to engage many of the representatives to shape our policy as to what their desires are. It's a democratic process, and I think we all benefit because of that. And lastly, I will encourage each and every one of you to take advantage of the public hearings as this item goes to the planning and zoning and then comes back to the council. And we are listening. Thank you, Mayor.
Good. Ms. Young?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, it's extremely important that we always take great pains to listen to our residents. In this situation, the cart may have come before the horse, and what I wanted to do is just explain to people what the process is and how this kind of evolved. As many of you know, a workshop was held with Newland this summer. It was held with both our Planning and Zoning Commission and our council. And at that time, they submitted this plan with 900 apartments, and then they submitted a plan to our Planning and Zoning Commission. It never had a chance to be reviewed or commented on by the Planning and Zoning because it was still, the city staff was still reviewing it, okay? After that, when it goes to Planning and Zoning, that's when we have a public process where people can come and talk to the commission and let them know what their concerns and their desires are. And after that, it comes to city council. So I think that if it had been allowed to go through the public process, a response favorable to our citizens would have evolved through the process that we use at this time. So I just wanted to let that comment be known. And also, unlike Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Jaju, I think that it needs to be, I definitely think there needs to be a limit on the number of apartments that we allow in our PDs. But I hate to tie the hands of people because sometimes a development may need a few more just to make it a successful development. And we don't want to create a development that is not successful, and then we end up having aborted development that cannot make it. So I think it's important to have the flexibility, and that's why we have a planning and zoning staff, commission, so that they can review all of this information and make very informed decisions.
Good, thank you. Mr. Gunny?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for our city attorney. Based on what's been presented today, and I'm supportive of the initiative, but my question is, why does it need to go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission? Is that a legal requirement?
Yes, sir. We must follow the zoning process. If you're going to make any text amendments or zoning amendments, it has to go back to the
Okay.
process.
Because this is a council-initiated move, essentially, is there a way to avoid, is there another option outside of going to the Planning and Zoning Commission to amend the ordinance?
No, sir.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Come, Mr. Porter?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your interest in your city government tonight. I compliment you and encourage you to stay engaged and active in your civic duties. We are always looking for civic-minded volunteers, so please let us know. We've got plenty of opportunities for you to participate in many ways to continue to make our city a great place to live, work, and play, as it's said. I'd like to make a few brief comments and address them to two different groups of people. The first group of people I will refer to are those people that signed a petition, and there's approximately 1,500 of them, and they signed a petition stating that they opposed the development of approximately 900 apartments in the Telfair area south of 59 across from the University of Houston. The second group of people signed a different petition. That petition calls for a referendum election and would revoke our development code. So those are the two petitions, and I'm going to speak to the people that signed the first petition and the people that signed the second petition, and some of you may have signed both. First to those people of the 1,500 or so who organized and signed a petition to let your elected officials know that you simply oppose 900 apartments that the developer had applied to the city to build. I thank you for doing that. At the time the developer presented his application, he had not done an impact analysis on our schools. But those of you who signed that 1,500 petition, predominantly, as I read through all the names and addresses on that petition, are predominantly within the Clements High School attendance zone. So you had an idea of what the impact might be, and you let us know that you were concerned about it. I think that's a good thing to have done. In response to that petition, our mayor met with the developer and told the developer, you have a problem. You need to address the concerns that are expressed by those 1,500 residents on the impact on the school attendance zones. In response to that, the developer said, I'm withdrawing my application. So the process of having a petition, letting us know what you think, without fear-mongering, without untruths, just straight ahead, this is what we want and this is what we don't want, that worked for you. You got what you wanted. And I thank you for that. Now, to those people that signed, what I'm told is approximately 3,000 people signed a separate petition for a referendum election. And I have a question for you. When you were asked to sign the petition for referendum election, did they tell you that if you were successful, our development code would be rolled back? And I don't mean by rolled back, replaced by something else. I mean withdrawn. And that for a minimum of 1 year, if that petition is successful, your city, my city, our city, will have no development code. What that means is, instead of maybe getting the petition withdrawn, anybody that owns a piece of property can develop whatever they want on it, and we have no control over that. That means instead of 900, you could get more. No development code. So if you were not told that the result would be total chaos, develop anything you want, wherever you want, and wherever you own property, then you were misled, and I'm sorry for that. Also, one of the drivers of this second petition was a fear of the word urban. That somehow the word urban in our new development code meant that the city staff, the non-paid volunteers on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and your elected officials all were conspiring to change Sugar Land into the city of Houston. And everybody that moved here from the city of Houston didn't want that to happen. I can say categorically tonight that the developer for the 900 apartments submitted an urban application. And did he get what he wanted? No. What that says to me is that just because he turned in an urban application and he wanted 900 apartments, he wasn't going to get them. So that is misinformation. So, I will conclude by saying, offering some wisdom that was written down about 3,000 years ago. And it says this: the one who states their case first seems right, until the other comes forward and examines them. So the next time somebody sticks a petition in your face and tells you that this is what's going to happen if you don't sign it, I would encourage you to pause and hear the other side before you sign the petition. Because if that petition for referendum election is successful, we're not going to have a development code at all, none, for 1 year, minimum according to state law. That's what you'll get. And I'm sorry that you were, if you didn't know that, you might want to take that up with the petition organizers. Thank you.
Wow. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Mitchell?
I'm both going to comment and question. Here, let me try again. I'm going to comment and question. First of all, my comment, Mr. Juju and I had a town hall meeting where many people came out, and that's very exciting. It's very difficult because people really didn't believe in us. They didn't believe we were listening. Hopefully today, people now realize we really do listen. We do this for love. We love the city. We work hard for the city. We put in countless hours. And we will take the wrath of the citizens and listen and do what we hope everybody agrees is the best for our city. It is always our goal. We don't do this for any personal purposes. We have other jobs that we have. This is a quote-unquote part-time job. But I loved everybody being out there. I loved hearing their voices. I loved that people cared enough to express themselves, whether through anger or otherwise. At least they were expressing themselves, and at least we were there to hear, listen, and respond. A lot of people worked very hard on the land use committee. It took years, and it took many volunteers, and they gave advice as to what we do, and we appreciate all the hard work of the citizens who've worked for so long to help us develop a land use plan. The development code, that's our Bible as to what we can do with development in our city. We had to figure out a way to protect the development code, because without the development code, we'd have no zoning at all. That was certainly going to be a bad outcome for every single person in this room. I applaud both Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Chiju for coming forward with this plan that addresses the concerns of the citizens and helps address the number of multifamily units. But now comes my questions, and Lisa, I need your help with this. First, what is being requested is we recall a Chapter 2, Plan Development. Why are we recalling it rather than just putting in or amending it so that it has a limitation on the number of multifamily units? Because explain first why we changed that in the first place, and why is it a good idea to get rid of it and go back to the old one?
Sure, I'll try to address. So first off, why did we change it? So as I kind of briefly mentioned through my presentation, there were elements of subjectivity in the previous code language. It used terms like superior development or special benefits, but there wasn't a lot of guidance in terms of how to evaluate a PD, in terms of what does it mean to be superior development. And so there's some subjectivity that was built into that language. What we attempted to do through the code update was provide some guidelines, some criteria for evaluating different styles of planned developments, whether that be the suburban or the urban. And then I also stepped through some of the other clarifications that we incorporated into the PD section of the code related to submittal requirements and final development timeframes and so forth. I think the resolution as drafted before you this evening is to just kind of reset the clock and go back to the previous language that was in the development code preceding the adoption of Ordinance 2014. In terms of it, there is still some information related to what should be submitted as part of, but there isn't the additional clarifications that were added as part of the recent update.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the more vague, but we will specifically, we're asking P&Z to limit it to 200 apartments, which is the same thing we have in R4. And other than that, it'll be identical to the old code.
Correct.
Okay, and all the planned developments, which you talked about that we, the 30, were all done under the old code.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, in terms of 200 apartments, because we've heard repeatedly, been on here now 4.5 years, that we need mixed use, must have some component of multifamily. Why?
Well, specifically, we think it helps with the mix of uses in terms of making them active, and just like here in Town Square, having that mix of uses really creates the diversity and of the types of uses that are here, and really makes a successful product in the end.
So in other words, if you have restaurants, you have to have people go to the restaurants.
Sure.
Having multifamily allows them to shop in the stores and eat in the restaurants, or go to the events like we have in Town Square.
Sure, and it provides just a different option to some of the other more typical parts of our city here in Town Square. You could truly live, work in Town Square, and just as an example.
Okay. And in other types of commercial development in Sugar Land, we can't do that, such as just on strips on Highway 6, for example, the strip centers.
Correct. If they have a standard zoning classification, your commercial B1, B2, residential is not a permitted use under those standard zoning classifications. Correct.
Okay. My last question is, we're limiting it to 200, that's the recommendation, is 200 apartments, and this will go back to planning and zoning, and then they'll make the decision, and it comes back to us. Why 200? Is that going to achieve our goal with regard to the mixed-use properties of having sufficient residential living for the development to thrive?
I think it's hard to pinpoint an exact number. What we have seen over time is that it hovers somewhere between the 200 and 300 range in terms of the types of developments that have developed through the PD process here in Sugar Land and have incorporated the multifamily aspect or component. But 200, I think, is the recommendation coming from the council members that have sponsored this resolution, and I think they have relied on some of the language, perhaps in the R4 zoning classification, to put that basis forward to you.
Well, and I understand why they would, but I would assume that the 200 in the R4 is there for a reason, and that it is the best use possible for the R4 to have 200, no more than 200. So wouldn't that same logic apply to the planned development?
It could, and again, remember that the R4 zoning is for standalone, so there aren't the other components such as office or commercial that would be allowed in that type of classification or zoning classification. The R4 is strictly for the multifamily type of development.
Well, again, I applaud both of you, and none of this was my criticism. I'm more trying to understand the impact we have, because, again, we have a duty to this community to do what is going to, in all likelihood, guarantee the success of any development. And I believe this pretty much is our last major development that we're talking about, the Track 5.
That is one of the last areas, the larger tracts of land that is undeveloped to date.
Okay. I thank you so much for responding to my questions.
Okay, any additional comments or questions? Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, a couple points of clarification, Mayor. There's been some discussion around the fact that apartments are considered an essential part of a mixed use. I don't think that's true. I can point to 3 mixed-use developments that are highly successful and don't have an apartment component. One of them's Flora, one of them's Lake Point, where I live, and the other one is right here in Town Center. So there are examples of successful mixed-use developments where apartments are not part of that. Does it provide additional flexibility for a developer? I think that's probably true. As to the 200 units, Amy, going way back when I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission, the 200 in the R4, when we went through and considered the update of the comprehensive plan, we were never able to find anything concrete about where that 200 came from. So it was
number.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. It just, I don't think there's anything that you can point to that says 200's the right number, wrong number, whatever. That was just the number at the time that it was adopted. So I offer that as a way of explanation that mixed-use developments can be successful, without apartments. And we have examples right here in Sugar Land.
Sure, there are other types of residential that could...
Condominiums, which is what we have here. We've got condos, right.
Okay. Ms. Young?
Yeah, I just had some questions, really clarifications for our residents, and that is, Town Square is an example of what we had defined in the updates as an urban development. This is a very good example of that.
Sure.
And when this came forward, originally, how many apartments were requested to be in this center?
Sure. That's a great example, yeah. When there were 288 residential units that were requested and approved through the PD process here for Town Square. There were 200 multifamily and 88 condo-style residential units that were approved in 2 separate locations here within Town Square. Obviously, today, that total number was actually not built and constructed. What we have next door are 167 residential condos. And that's a great point in terms of what we as staff looked at when we were crafting these specific criteria. We looked at examples that we have here in our community, both of suburban-style PDs as well as urban-style PDs. And truly, Town Square is really to date, only the only urban-style PD we have here. As an example.
And it's been very successful, but how many now they're condominiums, how many were actually built out of the 288?
If I recall, 167 are next door.
It's 167. And I know that the developer who visioned this and developed it said one of the drawbacks with not having as many as he originally planned is that it's been very difficult to keep retail here. We've done a great job with restaurants, but we haven't done a very good job with keeping a lot of the retails. They've gone out of business. And then Lake Point, of course, would be a very good example of a suburban. And that's how you defined it here. And that's been hugely successful, very, very successful. And in terms of Imperial Market, when that was approved, I remember we approved 300 units there, correct?
Sure. So, yes.
The actual market.
Through the general development plan for the Imperial development itself, the larger development, the general development plan approved up to 625 within the entire development, 300 being in the first phase, which is located next to the ballpark itself. What was actually constructed there was 254 units. Now, for the second phase, which is envisioned to be and being requested as part of the redevelopment of the Imperial refinery site, 325 units were approved through the general development plan for the second phase in that location, and the application coming forward soon to City Council will include a request for 274 units. So in both cases, below what was approved through the general development plan process.
And I think that's important because I don't think a developer is going to develop any more than he really feels is necessary for that development. So, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gundy?
The resolution itself, I want to make sure I'm clear on what we're doing here in terms of what this resolution means. We're giving explicit language in this resolution that's going to be directed to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
That's correct.
And I want to make sure that, and I see Kathy here, who's the chair of our Planning and Zoning Commission, I just want to make sure that you're very clear on what we're asking, or if this resolution passes, what the interpretation of that is. And the second question I have, and again, I'm just want to get the procedure down straight. If there's a change, or if there is a worst-case scenario, if there was a negative finding by the Planning and Zoning Commission, or a modification that's not in line with what's in the resolution, does this council have the ability at that point to still make an amendment?
Yes, you always have the ability to do that. And I would defer to legal to provide the legal ramifications of a different recommendation coming out of Planning and Zoning Commission than what you specified here.
Do you understand my question?
I think I do. I think you're asking that if you send this resolution to P&Z and they come back with a different recommendation to you, what your options are.
Correct.
Well, council has the option of accepting the recommendation as presented by P&Z or amending it to whatever you think it should be based on the information that was brought forward to you in the public hearings and your research and the recommendations by council.
Okay. I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Good. Mr. J.J.?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a couple points of 200 units. I think we included 200 units in this resolution as a multi-use development. I feel like that the next set of multi-family apartments or condos could be in a multi-use as integrated part of the development, not as a standalone. That is my view, and that's how we picked 200 because it's a reasonable number. Town Square has less than 200, and Town Square is a successful venture here. And what I view as the next set of multifamily development comes through, we have an integrated multifamily, be it condos for sale or for rent, or the apartments. And I just wanted to make that clear to that.
Okay, Mr. Porter?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My concern about this resolution is that it is based on a false premise. The fact that the word urban appears in it has nothing to do with us changing Sugar Land into Houston. We've already proven that by pushing back on the developer that came here with an urban application with 900 apartments on his application. The staff has spent 2 years working on this development code update, and just because people don't have assumed and been told that urban means we're going to turn into Houston, I don't think we should throw away the good work that's been done by volunteers and our staff. I don't have a problem with apartments as long as they're reasonable. And I think 200 might be the right number, but I don't know. But I can tell you this, my kids, I have 4 boys, they can't afford to live in this town. Single mothers can't afford to live in this town. New employees that the companies we recruit to come here that are right out of school with student loans, they're not going to be able to afford to live in this town. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't want them living here and afford some kind of housing they can afford. So we've had apartments in the city of Sugar Land for almost 3 decades. So apartments themselves, I don't think are a problem. Too many apartments are a big problem. Messing up attendance zones probably won't be a big problem in the future because we're not going to approve 900 apartments on that development. At least I'm not going to vote for 900 apartments. But I don't see why we have to throw out 2 years of really good and hard work to high grade our development code on a false premise that just because it has the word urban in it means that we're trying to change Sugar Land into Houston. I live here. I don't want it to be Houston. I moved from Houston into Sugar Land. But I'm willing to let the P&Z give some thought to it. But I do not support throwing out the baby with the bathwater here, folks.
Good comment. Okay. Any additional discussion or comments? You have a motion.
I do, so sorry.
Are you asking to speak?
I have a question, yes. And this
Ms.
is...
Mitchell?
Mr.
Speak up. Let's go.
Mr. Porter raises some good points about this. We're sending it back to P&Z. Are we giving them marching orders? Their only option is to get rid of what we have now and revert to the old one? Or do they have the option of considering some of the good components of the new development code portion about planned development and incorporate those into a ordinance?
I think that was posed
That
to
was
the
already-
question Mr. Gandhi
That's what,
proposed. So-
exactly.
I thought it
what
was the
asking.
opposite of that. I thought what you answered was, what they come out with, we have the option of not approving. My question, I think, is a reverse of what you answered before, if I'm correct, which is, we send this back. What we're sending back is something which says, revert to the old. Do they have the ability to incorporate what we have now with the old to come out with some mix Or are they limited by what we're doing to only throwing out the new and going back to the old with this one addition? And I don't believe that was the question asked before.
What you're doing is you're giving them direction on what you want them to consider. Because they are required to have a public hearing, they will receive additional information, which will be considered when they make the recommendation to you. So you're not giving them orders, you're asking them to consider these changes.
If you reread the resolution, it says to consider. This is not a directive.
Okay.
Absolute. Okay? Any additional discussions, comments, questions? Have a motion and a second? Discussion? None? Cast your vote. And it's approved unanimous. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I would like to also reflect, we appreciate the input. During the process, I had an opportunity to correspond and meet with some, actually gave me an opportunity to meet with a lot of people I hadn't had an opportunity to meet before. And for those that have reached out and asked for clarification, that too, I would thank you. It's a great opportunity, and for those that really wanted to learn the process, it was very lightening for all of us. So thank you, and please stay engaged. This will not happen in 8 days. We didn't do this in 8 days. We're not going to undo it in 8 days, so, as alleged. All right, any additional comments? None. Let's move on to item 5B, consideration of an action on the City of Sugar Land resolution.